This video tutorial I will explain how to test service layer code with JUnit 5 and Mockito frameworks. JUnit is used to test particular method in the class, and normally JUnit test cases won't communicate with databases and won't send any HTTP request to any services. And JUnit test cases are easy to run, and they often can be run every time we build the code. Here you can see Spring Boot demo project, and to support JUnit in pom.xml file, we have to add Spring Boot starter test dependency and JUnit Jupyter engine dependency. Here you can see source folder. Inside that main folder and test folders are there. Inside main folder, project related code will be there. And inside test folder, we have to write JUnit test cases. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to write JUnit test cases for user service symbol class, and which belongs to com.ram.service.imbal package, and it has create user method, get user method, like that several methods it has. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to write JUnit test case for this get user method. We will see how to do that. Go to this test folder. Inside that select ROM, right click, click on other, search for JUnit, select JUnit test case, click on next, and there are three options are there. This one is JUnit 3 test, this one is JUnit 4 test, and this one is JUnit 5 test, and here it called new JUnit Jupyter test. And here we have to select which class we are going to test. That is nothing but user service imbal class. This class. Click on OK. Here we have to put JUnit test case name. Copy this name. And add test. Then copy this package name. Here paste it. Then here I have selected setup. So this method will be automatically generated. Click on next. And in user service symbol class, which method we are going to test? That is nothing but get user method. Select this. Click on finish. And here you can see user service symbol test has been created, and setup method is auto generated, and we are going to test get user method. So test get user method is automatically generated, and we can run this JUnit test case, but it will fail because by default here it has put fail, the method is not implemented. Right click, run as JUnit test. Here you can see the output, and JUnit test case has been failed. And click on this, and it is showing where it has failed. Next we will write a proper implementation of test get user method and see how to test get user method using JUnit. Here you can see get user method, which is there in user service symbol class. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to test the business logic inside this method, and we no need to worry about business logic outside this method. And if you see, it needs a user repository object, and here user repository is auto-wired. So what we have to do is, this user repository, we have to mock it, because user repository is outside of this method, and we have to mock this user repository object and fake this find by email method, and this fake execution of find by email method will return hard coded user entity object. We will see how to do this using Mockito and JUnit together. Here I have defined a class user service symbol test. Here I have declared user repository object, and I have applied mock annotation to mock the user repository object. And here I have defined user service symbol object, and I have applied inject mocks annotation, and this allows to inject mock objects into user service symbol object. And in setup method, I am calling init mocks method of Mockito annotations, and this is needed for the Mockito to instantiate the mock objects and inject into user service symbol object. Here you can see test get user method, and here I have created user entity object, and in user entity object I am setting ID, first name, last name, email address, and user ID. And here what I am doing is, if find by email method of user repository object is called, then it returns the hard coded user entity object, basically faking the find by email method call using mocked user repository object. And then here I am calling get user method of user service symbol object, and passing the email ID. And this method returns user DTO object that I am asserting it should not be a null, and user DTO object has first name as Arun. This also I am asserting. If both are passed, then the JUnit test case will be passed, else it will be fail. Now I will run this JUnit test case in debug mode to understand it better. And here you can see we got mocked user repository object. And here we got hard coded user entity object, because this find by email method is a fake call. Using copy properties method of beanutils class, we are copying user entity property values to user DTO object. And here you can see the JUnit result, and it is in green color, and it ran successfully without any error. Now we will see how to write a JUnit test case which expect an exception with assert throws. Here you can see get user method which accept email address, and this method is there in user service symbol class. And here we are calling a find by email method of user repository object and passing email ID. And there is a possibility this method returns null. And if user entity object is null, then it throws username not found exception. And we will see how to write a JUnit test case to assert this username not found exception. Here I have written new JUnit test case. The test case name is test get user underscore username not found exception. And here I am mocking the find by email method. If find by email method of user repository object is called, then it returns null. And this piece of code, I am asserting the username not found exception when get user method of user service symbol object is called. Select this method, and I am going to run this JUnit test case in debug mode. And it throws username not found exception, and that has been asserted here. And if you see JUnit result, it is passed. Now we will see how to run JUnit 5 test cases with Maven. For that, what we have to do is we have to add this JUnit Jupyter engine dependency to our pom.xml file. Here you can see pom.xml file, and here I have added JUnit Jupyter engine dependency. Now I am going to run this Maven install command. What it will do is it will trigger JUnit test cases. If all JUnit test cases are passed, then it creates a jar file. Click on enter. And here you can see it triggered the JUnit test case, which is there in user service impl test. This one, and it has two test cases, and here you can see two test cases run. In that, 0 failures, 0 errors, and 0 JUnit test cases has been skipped, and all are passed. So it created a jar file in this location, and build is successful. Now what I will do is I will make one of the test cases failed. Again I am running the same command, and this time one of the test cases is failed, so it won't create a jar file, and build is failed. Now I am correcting the test case, running again. This time both the test cases are passed, and jar file is successfully created, and build is successful. Now we will see how to write a JUnit test case for create user method. Here you can see user service symbol class. It has create user method which accept user DTO object. We will see how to write JUnit test case for this create user method. And it uses user repository object, utils object, bcrypt password encoder object. So these things we have to mock it. So in user service symbol test, I have mocked that three objects. And also we have to fake this method calls like find by email, generate address ID, generate user ID, this encode method, and this save method. We will see how to do that. Here I have written test create user JUnit method, and here I am faking the method calls using mocked objects. If find by email method of user repository object is called, then it returns null. Like that, generate user ID method of utils is called, then it returns this value. And generate address ID method of utils is called, then it returns this value. And encode method of bcrypt password encoder is called, then it returns this. And save method of user repository object is called, then it returns user entity object, which is already configured in the setup method. Here I am calling create user method of user service symbol object and passing the user DTO object. Here I have created user DTO object, and in that I am setting first name, last name, email address, user ID, and address DTO list. And in address DTO list, there are two things are there. The first one is billing address, and second one is shipping address. And this create user method returns stored user details object. And here I am asserting stored user details object should not be null, and first name of user entity object and first name of stored user details object should be equal, and generate address ID method of utils object should be called two times. Now I am going to run this JUnit test case in debug mode. And here you can see the result, and JUnit is successful. We got green response. Now we will see how to assert an exception that is thrown in the create user method. In create user method, if find by email method returns user entity object, then it will go inside this if block, and it throws runtime exception with the message record already exists. We will see how to write JUnit test case to assert this runtime exception. Here I have written test create user underscore runtime exception JUnit method, and here I am faking the method calls using mocked objects. And if find by email method of user repository object is called, I am returning the user entity object. Then this and all are same, which we have seen in the previous test case. And here I am asserting the runtime exception when I call create user method of user service symbol object by passing the user DTO object. Now I will run this JUnit test case in debug mode. and it returns user entity object. So it will throw runtime exception, and here I am asserting the runtime exception. So here you can see the JUnit test case has been passed. You can get Java source code link for each video in the description section of the video. Here you can see the description section. Click on show more, and here you can see the Java source code links. Click on these links to get the Java source code.